Everybody, my name is Kat Bowser. I'm your resident fantasy therapist and welcome to my channel. Those of you here for the first time, welcome. My name is Kat Bowser. I'm a licensed therapist. I'm also a writer working on my first novel. And on my channel, I like to talk about what I consider to be the heart of all writing, and that's in the characters. And the heart of the characters is in their psychology. So that's the angle I like to take with pretty much everything we're going to talk about on my channel. So first and foremost, I apologize for missing last week. I got so sick on Thursday. Friday, I slept most of the day, and about the time I started feeling semi like a human being again, I didn't want to give you guys a half-assed video. So, that being said, we're gonna take off right where we left off. This month, I've been doing requested tropes for my trope diagnosis series, and this one I wanted to kind of combine two tropes together for this video because I kind of think they're very related, they're very similar, and I think if I were to do them separately, they would be two very short videos, but I think together I can kind of build on off of one another, so that's what we're going to do. So these two tropes were both recommended and or requested by Divine Wrath, and that is the God Complex trope and the Evil Messiah trope. So this one's actually fun. This is one that you're generally going to see a lot in villains or in the fallen hero. And essentially, what is a God complex? Honestly, a God complex, the easiest way I can think of to describe it is it's someone with narcissistic personality disorder taken up a notch. Most of the time, people that have narcissistic personality disorder, they have a very high inflated opinion of themselves. And somebody with a God complex, it doesn't necessarily mean they literally think they are God, but they think they are like a God in that they are above and better than everybody else. So very similar to narcissistic personality disorder, just kind of taken a little bit up. And a lot of times, actually, in the scientific community, in terms of psychology, there really isn't a lot of times a differentiation between the God complex and narcissistic personality disorder. I tend to think there is a slight difference, though. So, like I said, I consider it to be someone that has narcissistic personality disorder, does think very highly of themselves, has generally grandiose delusions, ideas, that kind of thing. But someone with a God complex has this sense of, I'm going to call it a sense of power, or a sense that they should have power. I think that's common in narcissistic personality disorder, but it's not necessarily always there. So that's the small distinction that I see. But something that I find very interesting is, why does someone develop a God complex? I've kind of talked a little bit about this before in how people develop narcissistic personality disorder, in basically that we don't entirely know. We think it's a mix of genes. We think it could be they were overpraised in their childhood or they were underpraised. But one thing we have found in people that generally have a God complex, more often than not, they were some kind of prodigy. Now, I'm not saying that if you're a prodigy, it means you're going to have a God complex. Most people do not. Most people that are prodigies turn out to be very well-balanced, completely normal human beings. But for the select few that will develop a God complex, the fact that they're a prodigy, I think, really has a lot to do with it. Reason being, when we're young and we are essentially developing our social sense of the world, we get a lot of our social sense from, one, what our parents tell us, but two, by our peers. So this could be people that you interact with at school, could be maybe the neighbors down the street, anyone that you have social interactions with that are around your same age. And generally in psychology, we consider that to be within like 3 to 4 years of your age. depending. It varies a little bit, but that's an average estimate. So, what happens with people that are prodigies is we use this social interaction to kind of figure out what's normal, what's average, what's expected, where we kind of fall. And so you're essentially figure out who your equals are. You figure out that, okay, teachers have authority, policemen have authority, parents have authority, grandparents have authority. Jimmy down the street is a friend, he's my equal, that kind of thing. But what happens with someone that's a prodigy is they really don't have someone that is their equal, just because their mental state is so different than someone who has what we would call average intelligence. Now, this is often made more complicated by what mom and dad say. Usually when you have a kid that's a prodigy, you're very proud of it for obvious reasons. So a lot of times there is a lot of push towards, okay, I want to get them in the best school. I want to get them the best tutors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the parents are telling them that these other kids that are your same age are not your equal. You're quote unquote better than them. Now, do parents do that on purpose? Generally, no. No, that's not generally what they're trying to do. But for someone that already has narcissistic tendencies, adding this on top of it kind of does it. So picture this. You're a kid and you're still figuring out your place in the world. Mom and dad are pretty much praising you for everything you do. And interacting with kids your same age, you're finding you don't think about things the same way they do. You don't see things the same way they do. And your parents are telling you it's because you're smarter than them. You're better than them. What are you supposed to think of yourself? And so that's really, I think, where a big root of the God complex comes from, is just not just being told that you're quote unquote better than someone else, but in your mind having evidence that proves it. I really think that's what it boils down to. Now, this makes for a fun character, though. One of my favorite things about a character that has a God complex is watching it break down, is watching them realize they are not all-knowing, they are not all-powerful. Because basically, when someone develops this kind of complex, they've essentially developed this viewpoint of the world that, they're better than everyone because of, XYZ, whatever reasoning they've come up with in their own head. And then usually what happens, these guys are usually the bad guy. Not always, but usually. And then here comes the hero that somehow or another manages to break down those walls and essentially say, no, see, I've beat you at this, I've foiled your plans here, this, that. And that disrupts their viewpoint and they don't know what to do with it. Because their whole life they've been told, I'm better, I'm worthy, I'm this, I'm that. And usually it's connected to ability. And I really think that's a strong point in this too, is that people with this complex associate them being better than someone with a physical ability, a mental ability, rather than what we would call like an interpersonal trait of like compassion and things like that. So someone with this complex believes they have to do something to be better. And then if you get told that and shown that over the years, and it just builds and it builds and it builds and it builds, by the time you're an adult, you've essentially been fed this idea your entire life that, yeah, you're better than everyone. You deserve to be better than everyone. Look what you've done. Nobody else is doing this. You are better. And then someone comes along and tears your world down. It's so interesting to watch. I will say, these are the kind of villains I think can probably be redeemed depending on what they've done. Because most of the time it's not just narcissistic personality disorder. There's usually other things in there. This, You usually have antisocial personality disorder too. Usually, sometimes there's some kind of trauma going on. There's lots of stuff in these kind of characters, but that's the basic bare bones breakdown, I think, regarding the God complex. Now we have the evil Messiah. This one, I think this one is really where your more conniving villains usually are. Reason being, the evil Messiah, it varies by the story, obviously, but most of the time, what I see is the person who's coming and who is saying that they are a messenger from God, or they are sent by God to save the people or whatever. But really, what they're doing is they're essentially damning the people. They're using it for their own self gain, that kind of thing. And the reason I think this one is more dangerous, honestly, is because it's very easy to plant doubt in people's minds. And by that, here's what I mean by that. So let's say you have someone who claims that they are a messenger from whatever the world's God is. And they're saying they're coming with a message that's going to save everyone from this huge calamity that's coming. And people that are pretty solid in their belief may dismiss it, but there's still this little nugget in the back of the head that's kind of like, what if they're right? And what a lot of times these characters do is most of the time they come in and they have some kind of prediction. Okay, within the next 5 moons there's going to be a massive calamity, or something like that. But here's the trick. Their predictions are usually very vague. And what that does is, we call this hindsight bias. So let's say like I said, their prediction is there's going to be a huge calamity within, maybe they say within the next month there's going to be a huge calamity, and that's what I have come to prevent you from falling prey to, whatever. So a month, give or take, goes by, and something happens. Maybe it's a natural disaster, maybe it's somebody goes nuts and kills a bunch of people, something like that. And here's what happens is, people that heard this guy preaching, okay, there's going to be this huge calamity. Now they see this horrible thing that has happened. And what hindsight bias is essentially, it's you assuming that things were predicted that really weren't. So you see this horrible thing that's happened, and your brain looks for a pattern. And so it goes through all your memories. Oh, this guy said there was going to be a calamity. This is a horrible thing. This must be what he's talking about. So your brain is finding patterns where there are none. And that's what this evil Messiah kind of character is usually so damn good at. It is essentially abusing this hindsight bias, and that plants more doubt in the mind of people who were maybe beforehand were very convinced that this guy's just a fake, but then stuff like this starts happening and they start doubting. They start thinking maybe he's right, maybe he has something that's really true, maybe he did come to help us. And then you get followers. And once you get followers, usually what happens is you essentially get a cult. And the main thing about a cult is isolation, is isolating people from outside news sources, from outside influences, so that the only influence is the person, the evil Messiah, making said influence. So when you control the information, you can really do some pretty nasty things. We have had several examples history-wise of this. I think the most famous is probably, what was it called? The Jonestown, where I think almost 1,000 people died by suicide because of a cult leader who did this kind of stuff. And that, I think, is kind of what the evil Messiah does, is they very much understand how to plant doubt in people and how to be manipulative of people's emotions. These are what I would call, what you guys colloquially would call a psychopath. And I really do think that's the best description of these kind of people. Now, do these people actually believe what they're preaching? That's where you can actually have some fun with this. Maybe they do believe it. Maybe in their mind, they are doing this for the good of the people and they truly believe it. I think that gets a little sticky though, because I don't know. I just think in general, these types of leaders, they usually, if they do believe it, they don't believe it as much as they play it up that they do. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but that's the impression I get, is most of the time it's done for self-gain and control, power. Power is a very alluring thing. And I really think that's kind of what goes on with the evil Messiah, is they find a way to exert power over people. Let me give you guys an example from history. Middle Ages, before the printing press. Essentially, you had the common people that went to the churches and places of worship and everything like that. And the priest was essentially giving them the information from the Bible because they were educated and they knew how to read Latin. So the people were reliant on this leader to tell them how to save their soul, how to get into heaven. Then along comes the printing press, and the first book that was printed was the Bible. And so now the poor people have access to the Bible, which they did not have before because books were expensive, so they couldn't afford it. Printing press made them affordable. So now that they are affordable, the poor people learn how to read, and they start to learn Latin. And they start to be able to get this information themselves without a leader. And the church lost a lot of power in this time period. And so that's when you see a lot of these new revolutionary ideas of like the Renaissance and things like that. And that's where you saw people rebelling against the church and showing, okay, we think that this is wrong, that it's not right, that you should be able to buy your way out of hell and that kind of thing. So then you have revolutions, you have new church movements and all kinds of things like that. So the basic idea is that this one central figure for a while had all the power. And then when the people take the power back, the structure falls apart. So that's kind of what I see with the evil Messiah, is usually what happens in stories is this person is either rising to power or he has been in power for a while. And the point of the story is the people take the power back. So that's just what I've observed and seen. And it's a very interesting storyline. I like to read it. I think it's engaging. I enjoy seeing characters get power back that they have lost or have not had. So just my interpretation. So that is basically both the evil Messiah and the God complex. I appreciate the recommendation. This was fun to research. If you guys have any other recommendations, make sure to drop them below, or any comments. I always love to get to them and read them and respond. I am moving my upload date to Friday and Sunday. Thursdays was just getting too hard for me to get videos up on time. So I upload every Friday and every Sunday. If you want to be notified whenever I upload, make sure you subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss any new videos. And until next time, I hope you guys have a great one.